Hey, Mike, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. Everything okay?
Yeah, my computer froze and it took in like 10 minutes to boot up again. And then I launched two Zoom programs and I had to stop the other one before I could start this one. So anyway, just get started here. I think we're on 20, right?
I thought it was 19.
19? Okay. I must have written it down wrong. But we'll start from 19 just in case. I wrote 19 or 13 through 19. So I thought we started on 20, but anyway, doesn't matter.
It could be. I thought we got caught up talking quite a bit about the action and inaction and
Let me see if I can recognize it. Okay, here is text 20. And here's 19. I don't think we've done 19. So let's start from there. Go ahead.
Yes, sarva samar ramba kama sankalpa varjita yan nidagha karmanam tamahu panditam buddha. Synonyms: yasya, one whose, sarve, all sorts of, samaramba, attempts, kama, based on desire for sense gratification, sankalpa, determination, varjita, are devoid of, jnana, of perfect knowledge, agni, by the fire, dagda, burned, karmanam, whose work, tam, him, ahu, declare, panditam, learned, buddha, those who know. Translation: one who is understood to be in full knowledge, whose every endeavor is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker for whom the reactions of work have been burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge.
Purport. Only a person in full knowledge can understand the activities of a person in Krishna consciousness. Because the person in Krishna consciousness is devoid of all kinds of sense gratificatory propensities, it is to be understood that he has burned up all the reactions of his work by perfect knowledge of his constitutional position as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of God. He is actually learned and who has attained to such perfection of knowledge. Development of this knowledge is of eternal servitorship to the Lord is compared to fire. Such a fire, once kindled, can burn up all kinds of reactions to work. I'll read the Sanskrit and you can read the next.
In these types of verses here, like when it's in purports, when it says, one who has this knowledge, is that also dependent on like that knowledge also means that you're acting in that way as well?
Oh, sure. I mean, there's two types of knowledge. One is Gyan and the other one is Vigyan, realized knowledge, which is, surrender to Krishna. When you're actually realizing the knowledge and doing what he says, surrendering to his message as it comes down in the disciplic succession, that is Vigyan knowledge, or realized knowledge, functional knowledge.
Because I mean, like I'm thinking of even just like the knowledge of like, I am not this body. I mean, it intellectually recognizing that is one thing, like living in that way is at least in my experience, completely different.
Yeah. Well, you can't really, that is not the goal of life. You can analytically understand that we're not the body by just saying, okay, well, if I cut my arm off, well, I'm still the same person. Yes. If I cut my leg off, yes, but, so the body, where is the soul? Who am I? And so when you realize you are part and parcel of Krishna, eternal servant of Krishna, and actually act in that way, you first establish your relationship to Krishna, and then you act in that way, then that is actually understanding your situation as a spirit soul. because you can't really experience something unless you act in that experience. You can't taste the honey if it's in a jar. You have to open up the jar and taste it.
Mhm.
That's like George Harrison said, the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. So that's the method of understanding spiritual knowledge. Spiritual knowledge means that it's coming down from the disciplic succession. It's revealed by Krishna. No other way to understand it than by, if Krishna is merciful to you, he will reveal that knowledge. And I was thinking about this morning, I heard a class by, do you know Yadunath Prabhu? He's a comedian in ISKCON. He's been around for years. I was looking up, I didn't ever see any of his comedy bits, but he was at the Festival Inspiration in 2014. I posted it on my timeline, but he's like, he does, comedy bits like some other people do, like Akendra, Yamadas Brahmachari. But he was at the Death Festival Inspiration. He gave class for the Bhakti Center this morning. And he was saying that you can't really understand, spiritual life until you can, get rid of all of your sensual desires. That's why we have these 4 regulative principles, and it's not a matter of just saying no. It's a matter of getting something higher so that you automatically give it up. Instead of saying, no, I can't do this, you say, I don't want to do this, that is the process. And then you're cleared, because one who is unattached to the, objects of sense gratification, are not bewildered by opulence and these things in the material world, can be resolute in his determination of devotional service. So it's like you're clearing a path straight back to Godhead. He was saying, it's a nice class. It's on my timeline if you want to check it out. But it's like, you go through a path and all of a sudden there's like a bunch of weeds and branches, and you find it looks like a clearing, but it's actually not the real path. So in order to get on the real path, first we have to follow the regulative principles, and then we, develop a higher taste by our regulative service activities. And then when we get a taste, then we're all of our other desires fall away, so then our path is straight, and we can do it with determination, because otherwise we'll get sidetracked by so many different things in the material world. So let me read this. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yeah.
Let me read this next text here. But I was also thinking, one important point that I was thinking of is that we have to read and we have to do everything as Krishna is telling us to, in a particular situation. Like right now, I'm reading this for you and for anybody that sees this on YouTube in the future. But we have to present it in such a way that Krishna is telling us, in a way that is pleasing to him. And that's a dynamic process, because it's not coming out of our own brain. It's coming out from Krishna himself. So we have to read every single word according to what Krishna is saying, and then present it in such a way that he'll be pleased. And then we'll be also more powerful. We as we surrender to him, he empowers us to do more and more. And our devotional strength becomes stronger and stronger, so that we can convince others of the real truth. So that's one of the really important points that I was thinking of this morning in class. And another thing is that, besides the sinful activities and the sense gratification, all these other things, I asked him, for me personally, the biggest impediment sometimes is that I'm thinking I'm the doer. I'm thinking that I do something. I'm a preacher. He was saying it's, devotee only is engaged in preaching Krishna consciousness. But if you think that I'm the preacher, you think that's coming out of the tiny factory of our brains, then we're really not a preacher, because then you're making something up. Nothing comes from us. Everything comes from Krishna. And so we act on that, on the basis of that impetus. Sorry.
And that ties back into that action and inaction, like we were talking about on Monday.
That's my ringtone, Hare Krishna, Hare Nam. Hold on, I gotta take this. Devananda, let me call you back. I'm in the middle of a Zoom class. I will. Do you know Devananda Pandit?
Mhm.
He's my good friend. You said I was tying back to what?
Well, we were like saying talking about on Monday with the action and inaction and inaction and action, like that we're not really the doers of what we're doing.
Yeah. That's a pretty complicated situation, that also it's really important to understand that, and I'm just getting a glimpse of it myself, but I always have, the mind can go so many different places, and you think you have a technique or something. I used to do Sankirtan. I'd say to myself, well, if I say it in this way, maybe I say it in that way. But if you just surrender to Krishna and say exactly what he wants you to say, and then just, do that, then eventually it'll become like a second nature, and then you'll understand that he's actually the doer. You don't, and then you're so freed from having to speculate about what you should do. Should I do it this way or that way? The Krishna within the heart confirms whatever that you're doing, and you can tell if Krishna is pleased or not by how he's giving you knowledge, because as you surrender, he gives you more and more knowledge. So that's the bottom line, in action and in inaction. Inaction means that you're not really doing anything, but you are surrendered to Krishna's will in every single second of the day and acting according. One who acts in that way, Krishna says he's very dear to me. One who agrees with with what I'm saying and who acts in a way that I like, then that person becomes dear to Krishna, because you're acting on a transcendental platform, and only for his pleasure, not for our own sense gratification, But we're really not acting. We're just it's like a son and a father, so the father gives the son some money, and the son goes out and buys whatever, a pack of cigarettes or something for the father for his birthday. And then it's really it's a gift, but it comes from the father, it's not coming from the son. So we don't have any good qualities, but when we surrender to Krishna, he can give us all good qualities. Is that
Yeah.
So that's it. That's what I learned this morning. Text 20, Takta karma phala sangam nitya tripto nirashraya karmani adi pravritopi naiva kinchit karoti sa. Synonyms: Tvaktva, having given up; karma phala asangam, attachment to fruit of results; nitya, always; tripta, being satisfied; nirashraya, without any shelter; karmani, in activities; abhi pravrita, being fully engaged; api, in spite of; na, does not; eva, certainly; kinshit, anything; karoti, do; sa, he. Translation: abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no furtive activity, although he is engaged in all kinds of undertaking. See, that's the science, It's a, a materialist might act exactly like a devotee, but or a devotee might act exactly like a materialist, is what I'm saying. They might act in a similar way, but they're completely different in their consciousness, because one is totally selfless and the other is performing selfish activities for a fruit of results, which entangles him more and more in the modes of material nature. Go ahead and read the purport, and then the next verse too.
Purport. The freedom from the bondage of actions is possible only in Krishna consciousness, when one is doing everything for Krishna. A Krishna conscious person acts out of pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore he has no attraction for the results of the action. He is not even attached to his personal maintenance, for everything is left to Krishna. Nor is he anxious to secure things, nor to protect things already in his possession. He does his duty to the best of his ability and leaves everything to Krishna. Such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reactions of good and bad. It is as though he were not doing anything. This is the sign of karma, or actions without fruit of reactions. Any other action, therefore, devoid of Krishna consciousness, is binding upon the worker, and that is the real aspect of vikarma, as explained herein before.
Yeah, I mean, it's like It's like saying, like, for example, you get up on a slide, in a water park or something. You go straight down the slide. There's no friction there. You just go right into the ocean of transcendental bliss. But then if you fall off, if you're doing something for yourself, you fall into quicksand, you know, and you're bound more and more. The more you struggle, the more you're involved with the reactions and actions of your activities. So that's just surrendering to Krishna is such a relief. It's free from anxiety. You don't have to worry, am I doing this or doing that properly? You don't have to make anything up. You just follow the suggestion of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, chant Hare Krishna, and execute your duty as it is, as you're seeing it in a moment-to-moment basis, in any given situation. Go ahead and read the
Sure.
next text.
Next 21. Nirashiryata chitatmam sharyam kevalam karmam. Oops, skipped a line, sorry. Jaktava sarva parigraha sariram kevalam karmam kurvan noti kilbisam. Synonyms. Nirasi, without desire for the result. Yata, controlled. Chityatma, mind and intelligence. Jakta, giving up. Sarva, all. Parigraha, sense of proprietorship over possessions. Sariram, in keeping body and soul together. Kevalam, only. Karma, work. Kurvan, doing. Na, never. Apnoti, does acquire. Kilbisam, sinful reactions. Translation. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions.
Purport. A Krishna-conscious person does not expect good or bad results in his activities. His mind and intelligence are fully controlled. He knows that because he is part and parcel of the Supreme, the part played by him as a part and parcel of the whole is not his own activity, but is being done through him by the Supreme. When the hand moves, it does not move out of its own accord, but by the endeavor of the whole body. A Krishna-conscious person is always dovetailed with the supreme desire he has no desire for personal sense gratification. He moves exactly like a part of a machine. As a machine part requires oiling and cleaning for maintenance, so a Krishna-conscious man maintains himself by his work just to remain fit for action in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Therefore, he is immune to all the reactions of his endeavors. Like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. A cruel proprietor of an animal sometimes kills the animal in his possession, but yet the animal does not protest, nor does it have any real independence. A Krishna-conscious person fully engaged in self-realization has very little time to falsely possess any material object. For maintaining the body and soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. He does not, therefore, become contaminated by such material sins. He is free from all reactions to his actions. That just reminds me of something I posted today on Facebook. It's a little thing called the Ownership Society. You know that there's a song by George Harrison. He wrote about this. Ahamameti means I, me, and mine. That's a common theme. This is the basis of the false ego. Nothing. And George W. Bush back in 2000s, he had this whole idea of the ownership society where everybody should own a house and stuff like that. But this is all false. We don't own anything. Everything belongs to Krishna. So therefore, the men should offer everything. This is from the purport of 529, which is the peace formula. Prabhupada based his peace formula from the fifth chapter, last verse of the 5th chapter. Men should offer everything to the transcendental service of the Lord because he is the proprietor of all planets in the heaven and the demigods thereon. We don't own anything. We don't even own our own body. But, from cradle to grave, the reason we're here in this material world is because we want to lord it over the resources of material nature, which do not belong to us. So therefore, we have a thief's mentality. And that because we're here, we have that mentality when we're actually born. We're born with that thievish mentality, and we carry it with us from cradle to grave. And this is the toddler, it doesn't matter if you're a toddler or a grown-ass human being. This is the property law of a toddler. You see that?
Yeah, I've seen that before.
Yeah. That's the way everybody thinks. This is my family, my country, my possessions. And, I've included George Harrison's song, with lyrics in it. And then Bhagavad-gītā 529, the peace formula. If everybody understood who the proprietor is and actually understood that he's the best well-wishing friend of all living entities, then there would be peace in the world. But unfortunately, oh my God, hope this is not responding anymore. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Everybody has the idea of, this is mine. We're not the best friend of every living entity. We're not the proprietor of anything, and we're not the doer. Krishna is the doer. He's the proprietor, and he's the best friend. Because how many friends can we have? Krishna is in everyone's heart. He's a friend to every single living entity in the entire universe and all the universes at the same time. He knows what everybody's doing. And so he's actually the best friend. So what kind of friendship do we have compared to Krishna? We're nothing compared to him. So, but we're really proud of all our accumulated wealth and all our friends and family. And we think that they're ours and we have to protect that. But it's just all nonsense. It's an illusion. So why don't you read the next verse and paragraph and purport, I mean.
Text 22.
Yeah.
Okay. Nadarcha labha santushto vandavat vaitito vimatsaram samasidav asidhalcha tritvapina nibhadyate. Synonyms: yadricha, out of its own accord; labha, with gain; santushta, satisfied; vandava, duality; atita, surpassed; vimatsara, free from envy; sama, steady; siddhau, in success; asidhau, failure; cha, also; krutva, doing; api, although; na, never; nibhadyate, becomes affected. Translation: he who is satisfied with gain, which comes from its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. Purport: a Krishna-conscious person does not make much endeavor even to maintain his body. He is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord. He neither begs nor borrows, but he labors honestly as far as in his power, and is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. He is therefore independent in his livelihood. He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his service in Krishna consciousness. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the material world. The duality of the material world is felt in terms of heat and cold, or misery and happiness. A Krishna conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, he is steady both in success and in failure. These signs are visible when one is fully in transcendental knowledge.
Okay, let's see. Okay, I'll just read the next one. We'll take turns. If the short purports are short. Text 23. Gita sangasya muktasya gyanavas stita chetasa gyana yacharita karma samagram pravaliyate. Synonyms: Gata sangasya, of one unattached to the modes of material nature; muktasya, of the liberated; jnana avastita, situated in transcendence; cetasa, whose wisdom; yajnaya, for the sake of yajna, Krishna; acharata, acting; karma, work; samagram, in total; praviliyate, merges entirely. Translation: the work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. See, that's the whole process of sacrifice. The sacrifice for yajna, Krishna, is the worker or the person performing the sacrifice itself, the fire of the sacrifice, everything becomes one entity. He becomes merged into transcendence through that process. Purport. But becoming fully Krishna conscious, one is freed from all dualities and is thus freed from the contaminations of the material modes. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position in relationship with Krishna, and thus his mind cannot be drawn from Krishna consciousness. Consequently, whatever he does for Krishna, who is the primeval Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices, because sacrifice aims at satisfying the Supreme Person, Vishnu, Krishna. The resultant reactions to all such work certainly merge into transcendence, and one does not suffer material effects. Go ahead, read the next verse.
Text 24. Brahma pranam Brahma havir Brahmagna Brahmana utam Brahmaivatena gantavyam Brahma karma samadhina. Synonyms: Brahma, spiritual in nature; Apanam, contribution; Brahma, the supreme; Aviya, butter; Brahma, spiritual; Agna, in the fire of consummation; Brahmana, by the spirit soul; Uttam, offered; Brahma, spiritual kingdom; Eva, certainly; Tena, by him; Gantavyam, to be reached; Brahma, spiritual; Karma, inactivities; Samadhina, by complete absorption. Translation: a person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute, and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Keep going.
Read the purport.
Purport. How activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul, entangled in material contamination, is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. The material absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices, simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness, or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. The word Brahman, means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahma-jyotir, his spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in the Brahma-jyotir, but when the jyotir is covered by illusion, maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor and the result are all combined together, Brahman, or the absolute truth. The absolute truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter, dovetailed for the cause of the absolute truth, regains its spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi, or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called jnana, or sacrifice for the absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, through the process of yoga or spiritual sacrifice, the goal of all this knowledge is reached, which is to distinguish between reality and illusion. You know, that's the goal of the Vedas, to help the conditioned soul understand what is the difference between reality and illusion. I think there's some verse in the Bhagavad-gītā that explains that. Text 25. Devam eva param yagyam yogina parapasite. Brahmagnav apare yagyam yagneaivo pajuvati. Synonyms. Daivam, in worshiping the demigods, eva like this, epara, some others, yagam sacrifices, yogina mystics, priyapasate, worship perfectly, Brahma, of the absolute truth, agno, in the fire, apare, others, yagam, sacrifice, yagneya, by sacrifice, eva, thus, upajuvati, offer. Translation. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some offer sacrifices in the fire of the Supreme Brahman. Report. As described above, a person engaged in discharging duties in Krishna consciousness is also called a perfect yogi or a first-class mystic. But there are others also who perform similar sacrifices in the worship of demigods, and still others who sacrifice to the Supreme Brahman or the impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord. So there are different kinds of sacrifices in terms of different categories. Such different categories of sacrifice by different types of performers only superficially demark varieties of sacrifice. Factually, sacrifice means to satisfy the Supreme Lord Vishnu, who is also known as Yaga. All the different varieties of sacrifice can be placed within two primary divisions, namely sacrifice of worldly possessions and sacrifice in pursuit of transcendental knowledge. Those who are in Krishna consciousness sacrifice all material possessions for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, while others who want some temporary material happiness sacrifice their material possessions to satisfy demigods, such as Indra, the sun god, etc. And others who are impersonalists sacrifice their identity by merging into the existence of impersonal Brahman. The demigods are powerful living entities appointed by the Supreme Lord for the maintenance and supervision of all material functions like heating, watering, and lighting of the universe. Those who are interested in material benefits worship the demigods by various sacrifices according to the Vedic rituals. They are called Bhavishvaravadi, or believers in many gods. But others who worship the impersonal feature of the absolute truth and regard the forms of demigods as temporary, sacrifice their individual selves in the supreme fire and thus end their individual existences by merging into the existence of the Supreme. Such impersonalists sacrifice their time in philosophical speculation to understand the transcendental nature of the Supreme. In other words, the fruitive workers sacrifice their material possessions for material enjoyment, whereas the impersonalist sacrifices his material designations with a view to merging into the existence of the Supreme. For the impersonalist, the fire altar of sacrifice is the Supreme Brahman, and the offering is the self being consumed by the fire of Brahman. The Krishna conscious person, like Arjuna, however, sacrifices everything for the satisfaction of Krishna, and thus all his material possessions as well as his own self, everything is sacrificed for Krishna. Thus, he is the first-class yogi, but he does not lose his individual existence. Yeah, I don't know why anybody would actually try to sacrifice their own selves into the fire of Brahman or whatever. It sounds like a kind of suicide, and that is kind of like what it is. Go ahead and read the next verse.
Shrotadnin Triyani Anye Samyamagnishu Juvati Sabdadin Vishayan Anya Indriyagnishu Juvati. Synonyms. Shrota Adini, such as the hearing process. Indriyani, senses. Anye, others. Samyama, of restraint. Agnishu, in the fires. Juvati, offer. Shabda Adin, sound, vibration, etc. Vishayan, objects of the sense gratification. Anye, others. Indriya, of the sense organs. Agnishu, in the fires. Juvati, they sacrifice. Translation. Some, the unadulterated brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control, and others, the regulated householders, sacrifice the objects of the senses in the fire of the senses. Purport. The members of the four divisions of human life, namely the brahmachari, the grihastha, the vanaprastha, and the sannyas, are all meant to become perfect yogis or transcendentalists. Since human life is not meant for our enjoying sense gratification like the animals, the four orders of human life are so arranged so that one may become perfect in spiritual life. The brahmacharis, or students under the care of a bona fide spiritual master, control the mind by abstaining from sense gratification. A brahmachari hears only words concerning Krishna consciousness. Hearing is the basic principle for understanding, and therefore, the pure brahmachari engages fully in Hare Namanu Kirtanam, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. He restrains himself from the vibrations of material sounds, and his hearing is engaged in the transcendental vibration of Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Similarly, the householders, who have some license for sense gratification, perform such acts with great restraint. Sex life, intoxication, and meat eating are general tendencies of human society, but a regulated householder does not engage in unrestricted sense life and other sense gratification. Marriage on the principles of religious life is therefore current in all civilized human society because that is the way for restricted sex life. Restricted unattached sex life is also a kind of yajna because the restricted householder sacrifices his general tendency towards sense gratification for higher transcendental life.
Yeah, Prabhupada said that the grahastas who are actually following the principles, they're actually also brahmacharis. So we're going to have to end it. Do you have any questions or anything?
No, taking it all in.
Yeah. So text 27 next time.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you Friday.
Talk to you on Friday. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.